Good King Wenceslas looked out, escaping from his fable. He loved to play chain of command on his war games table. Hello folks, here we are back again for another day of the TooFatLardies Advent Calendar 2024. And here we have another door. Let's see, open this one, see what it says. Hello Nick, it says. Fat Fighters. Ooh, it's a bit personal. Oh, I see. Fat Fighters. Fat Fighters, it says. When you have streamlined an aspect of a set of wargames rules. Tell us about that. And why did you do that? And what was the result on the tabletop? Well, the questions that we get asked in this advent calendar are becoming a bit more like a police interrogation each day. Each time I open it, there's another testing one. It's an interesting one because I think my first memory of streamlining an aspect of wargames rules probably goes back to the old Bruce Quarry Napoleonic rule sets that many of us will remember having used in the 1980s. Something, it was so detailed that the movements of individual units were different by fractions of a centimetre, if I recall rightly. It had paces covered per minute, etc. If we were playing these games on my friend's bedroom floor at that time, which might sound a bit weird really compared to what kids get up to these days in their friends' bedrooms, but we used to fight large battles that we fought on the guy's floor in his room. And the reason we did that, of course, was that it was the biggest space we had that we could play, and we used to have big battles that would last 2 or 3 days. And I remember loading up my bike with boxes and boxes of figures. They would have been Airfix plastics in those days, and we used to go around, lay them out, set up the terrain, fight the battles. And we thought that using something like that, the Bruce Quarry set, was going to add some real realism and historical accuracy to our games to make them so much more realistic. But of course, all it did, with all due respect to those rules, which I think are a stepping stone for many of us, all it did was make them horrendously complicated, extremely slow, and very, very dull. Now, that's not a reflection necessarily on the intention of those rules, of course, but it certainly was the impact it had on us at that time. And I think even as a teenage wargamer, I realised then that, it's not something that can be sustained. And clearly I found that when I went to the local wargames club, where, thanks to the likes of the wonderful Bill McNally, we were treated to very, very simple but effective rule sets, I just felt that this kind of detail just wasn't relevant. And so if I think about the effect that's had on me going forward as a game designer and as a player, I think my reflection will probably be that it's made me want to create a narrative for the action more than the minute detail. The minute detail for me loses interest, loses impact, and the narrative and the prose, if you like, that goes alongside that is really, really crucial. What I mean by that is that I don't want my French infantry to come on at the mechanical rate of however many yards per minute that it might be, stated in those rules, in that kind of very, very predictable way. But it means I want to see them coming on in the same old style, if you know what I mean by that, which is a reference, of course, to the statement from the film made by, what's his name, Hawkins, who plays Picton in the film Waterloo. But whether it's supposed to have been said by Picton in the real battle or not, I can't remember now. But anyway, the desire is to capture the feeling of what's happening and not the minutiae, detail, mathematical rate of advance of the French infantry, even though they're using, no doubt, the pas de charge as a rate of their advance. There's no way in the world that they would have covered a set distance in a set time at a set rate in that muddy Belgian field. So I think we get caught down in detail really, really easily, and technical specifications are a big factor in that. It doesn't matter really that a Jeep can do 40, 50 miles an hour. It just matters that it goes quickly. It doesn't matter that a machine gun that's firing at you fires 1,000 rounds a minute, whereas mine only fires 800 rounds a minute. It doesn't matter. It's a machine gun. I don't sit behind my cover saying to myself, it's okay for me to poke my head out because your machine gun's only got a 400 rate of fire, whereas the other one over there has 1,000 rate of fire. The fact that it's a machine gun firing at me is all that matters. And this is what we see in the historical narratives, isn't it? So, you know, when I look at this in terms of rule design, I look at it with two sets of eyes, actually, which must make me some kind of wargaming wolf spider. But I think the first frame of reference is the frame of reference that fits with something like Bag the Hun. So Bag the Hun is a World War II dogfighting rule set that I wrote a long time ago now, but it's still played and enjoyed by many long-suffering people, and I'm grateful for that. But because it's the gift that keeps on giving, there's lots of fun games to be had on Bag the Hun. But it's still very popular, and what we tried to do with Bag the Hun was simplify what is a very difficult, very fast, and very technical specification world, if you like. Aircraft are like top trumps, aren't they? You know, the top speed of this aircraft is 6 miles faster than the aircraft that it's up against, and the turning circle altitude of this aircraft is tighter than the other aircraft, and the next aircraft coming along has a rate of fire which is greater than the previous aircraft, and the rate of climb of this aircraft is not as good as the other aircraft, etc. All these kind of factors make it horrendously complicated. And believe me, it was horrendously complicated to research. And we could have created a horrendously complicated set of rules. And some people might say that we did. But the other aspect, of course, of air warfare is manoeuvre. And manoeuvre in 3 dimensions is always more difficult than manoeuvre in 2 dimensions. But I think what we succeeded with Bag the Hun was somehow taking it to a playable level. I think, however, nowadays that if we were to ever revisit this, which we're not going to, by the way, we're not going back to ever touch Bag the Hun, I don't think, we would simplify it even further, cutting out much more of the technical detail, and it would probably look more like Water Tanker than it would Bag the Hun, because I'd still want to further simplify a lot of the technical factors. So now then, the risk, of course, when you do that is that it upsets people for whom that is the be-all and end-all of dogfighting. In particular, we had a lot of pushback from people who felt the technical specifications and the engineering characteristics really meant something. And of course they do. They do mean something. They really, really do. But there's still the human at the front, sitting in the cockpit behind the gun sight. So what we did through the play mechanisms, in Bag the Hun, we wanted to emphasise the human behind the joystick, who is the big difference, and not necessarily the technical characteristics, although, of course, they are important and you cannot get away from them. It's trying to put a finger on what is relevant and what is not. And to my mind, that came from in-depth reading, in-depth research, pilot accounts, first-hand accounts about what pilots were saying and what pilots said make a difference. What was it that they were talking about? Was it the size of their engine that made a difference, or was it their grasp of aerial tactics? And what consistently came across was things like the grasp of aerial tactics meant that an okay pilot in an average plane could beat a poor pilot in a good plane. And that's kind of what we've done, I think. It's that historical research that allows you to create a nuanced game design which is simple enough to be understood by people who don't need a degree in aeronautical design. And that means letting go of a lot of stuff that appears to be really important and preparing to be quite heretical about that, I think. And we took that even further when we did Water Tanker, because Water Tanker was a greater simplification than Bag the Hun ever was. And the aim there was very much on fun. So it's very easy for us to leave behind some of the technical aspects of some individual tanks because they just weren't relevant for the type of game that we were trying to set up. It does not matter that a one tank rotation speed turret is faster necessarily than another one, unless it's a substantial difference, of course. You don't need to replicate the Bruce Quarry table for turret rotation speed for 30 tanks You just need to be able to say who was slow and who was fast, or who had a low profile. And that makes a big difference. But I think really the key thing with a question like this question about cutting out fat, is this simplification is a good simplification. If it allows the game to have more nuance, if it allows the game to run more smoothly, if it allows the game to have a more plausible outcome. So I think that nobody really enjoys a really tight mechanical simulation, and that mechanical simulations are skewed as soon as you put the human in the system. Few people would enjoy that boring technical rerun, and nobody certainly would want to play a game after their Christmas lunch. So I think that simplicity, maybe simplicity is the wrong word. It's taking out the complexity and replacing it with a smooth and nuanced system that gives plausibility of outcome. And it is that plausibility of outcome that makes games attractive and makes the outcome uncertain, and means that we can keep our games light-hearted and fun, and yet still retain that crucial historical feeling of accuracy.